Welcome to the Aced It podcast, where we turn science into sense. As we begin our 11th season, I wanted to let you know that Jcoin has a new O. That's right. The formerly Justice Community Opioid Innovation Network is now the Justice Community Overdose Innovation Network. Same wonderful network, same awesome podcast, but with a broader emphasis. So I am so excited that you're with us. I'm Danielle Rudes, your host, and this is Aced It. Welcome to episode 8 of season 11 of the Aced It podcast. On today's episode of our season on substance use disorder, overdose, and loved ones, we're talking about people's experiences having unhoused loved ones with substance use disorder and overdose incidents. This is an especially important population to talk about because the data indicates that unhoused people have disproportionately higher rates of substance use disorder and overdose incidents than housed people. That statistic comes from studies conducted by Chatterjee and Tischberg, 2018, Duran and colleagues, 2022, Mallet and colleagues, 2005, and Tamamoto and colleagues, 2020. All of these studies looked at different states' data and came to the same conclusion. In fact, according to the Massachusetts Department of Public Health in 2017, people experiencing houselessness face up to 30 times higher risk of overdose than those who are housed. Moreover, in a study conducted in Boston, Massachusetts by Fine and colleagues in 2022, the authors found that drug overdose accounted for 1 in 4 deaths among unhoused people. So, as these numbers suggest, if we're going to talk about substance use disorder, overdose, and families, we also have to talk about the experiences of the unhoused. Now, there isn't a ton of research out there that directly examines the relationship between loved ones, substance use disorder, overdose, and houselessness, but there is some. The first area of research examines how family relationships impact people's paths into and out of houselessness. The second area of research examines how people perceive and access treatment for drug addiction while they are houseless and how family support impacts these decisions. Today, let's dive into that research. Okay, let's talk about how family relationships impact people's paths into and out of houselessness. In 2005, Mallet and colleagues interviewed 302 unhoused youth and found that there are 4 main pathways into houselessness, and all of them had to do with family conflict. In the first pathway, a person's drug use leads to family conflict, which turns into houselessness. In the second pathway, family conflict leads a person to drug use, which in turn leads to houselessness. In the third pathway, family conflict leads to houselessness, which in turn leads to drug use. In the fourth and final pathway, a family member's drug use leads to family conflict, which in turn leads to houselessness. In their study, nearly a third of interviewees said that personal or familial drug use was a critical factor in them being houseless. So, what we're gathering from this study is that there is a connection between addiction and houselessness, and that family dynamics impact this connection. In a different study conducted in Dublin, Ireland, Maycock and colleagues, 2011, interviewed houseless young people over numerous years and found that while some people describe becoming houseless due to difficult family environments, similar to the study conducted by Mallet and colleagues, their path out of houselessness was also shaped in large part by people's relationships with their family. Interviewees said that reestablishing trust and communication with their families was an important first step toward moving out of houselessness. And they also said that both themselves and their parents needed to accept responsibility for the ways in which they contributed to the person's houselessness. All right, now that we've covered how loved ones impact paths into and out of houselessness and also addiction, let's also talk about how people perceive and access treatment for drug addiction while they are houseless. In 2018, Chatterjee and Tischberg interviewed adults who were houseless and staying in the Boston area shelters with their children and found that while there were significant barriers to treatment, such as childcare and transportation, family unity, so things like support and encouragement, was seen as a universal motivator for participation in addiction treatment. In a different study conducted by Schwartz and colleagues 2022, the authors interviewed houseless people and found that withdrawal symptoms, complicated to navigate medical processes, and provider stigma prevented people from seeking addiction treatment, while stress with finding drugs and shelter, belief in efficacy, and readiness for treatment increased people's interest in pursuing treatment. Family and peer influences were also present in all of this, as people spoke about times where their loved ones encouraged and discouraged them from seeking treatment. All right, with that, we've reached the end of our episode on people's experiences having unhoused loved ones with drug addiction and overdose incidents. This is a really important topic to talk about, given the high rate of substance use disorder and overdose among the unhoused population. I'll talk to you on the next episode, where we'll be covering loved ones, addiction, and overdose in the context of rural areas. As a reminder, if after listening to this episode, you need support, please contact the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Thank you for listening to the Aced It podcast. We love hearing from you. So if you have comments, topics to suggest, or some science you'd like us to cover in a future season, please write to me, Danielle Rudes, at Sam Houston State University in Texas. My email is drudes, D-R-U-D-E-S, at shsu.edu. And of course, thank you to the Justice Community Overdose Innovation Network, JCOIN's Coordination and Translation Center, funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, housed at George Mason University, where this podcast originated. Thank you to our fabulous scriptwriter and also my fantastic doctoral student, Bryce Kushmerek McCune. And a huge and heartfelt thank you to the team at Slonky LLC for their wonderful podcast production, as always. Tune in again for another episode of Aced It.